Welcome everybody to another exciting episode of Learning with Belvista Studios. This is a space where my team and I invite people that we're curious about because we see them doing different things, thinking about the world differently. They're exploring stuff and we're very curious about it. So we create this space to go, hey, teach us, or like, let us dig deeper and just understand your mind and what you're experimenting with in the world. My guest today is I'll call you a peer from, we have a common like interest. We're part of a group that's around futures thinking, and some of the stuff that Serena, my guest, has brought up, I'm like, oh, I love her thinking. So yeah, she's in the space of strategy, which I personally love, playing in that kind of change strategist, foresight practitioner. And that foresight stuff is the real futures thinking that we're in this kind of community group together. And what I love about that is it's the problem solving aspect, and we're really big on human-centered design, and I wanted to learn more like questions to ask and get activities to be able to do that. What I see value in is that you've got great experience and different ways in terms of like facilitation, human-centered design stuff, and that future foresight stuff. So that's where our audience should be getting very excited and taking out their notebooks now, because I feel like we're going to be in for a real treat about learning from Serena today. So thank you for being here. Very, very stoked to have you. Okay.
Thank you, Kim.
First question. We are thinking about like problem solving and curiosity. What are the problems that you're curious about at the moment?
Yes. So personally and professionally, I have been thinking a lot about creativity, and I have always had a lot of angst about like my own creative practice. So last year I actually went through a full year of group coaching, where I really dove into how can I really bring the fullest creative expression of myself, for the sake of a more flourishing world in many ways. And so and a lot of my day-to-day work, whether it's running a creative ideation session, or finding a really interesting signal of change and sharing that with my colleagues, I think I'm always really wanting to see what that spark could become, and chase that, and also see what when people come together, those collaborative moments, what that could bring.
That's cool. Yeah, can you explain what an example of a signal of change and how it might have, like, what has it turned into, or where might this lead us to?
Yeah, I feel like in terms of, so I've been working quite a bit in the future of work space. And obviously there's the obvious, quiet quitting TikToks, and people feeling burned out. But I feel like what is most interesting actually is when we also look at what is happening in the Web3 space, when we're looking at the creator economy evolving thanks to the technology of crypto and blockchain. Like, really, how can creators be more empowered? And we're seeing more also, actually the most interesting signal here is that I found the first decentralized talent network called Brain Trust. So they are a network where people could find freelance jobs. So maybe I am a coder, or I'm a designer, and I could get matched with projects with Nike, or with other kind of big companies or big brands. And how it's also decentralized is that they, when you are brought into the network, the person who brings you in will get rewarded with what they call the B Trust token. Or when you peer review someone else's works and vet them to become part of the network, you also can receive a B Trust token. And this token is like, it's not how you're paid. You're still paid in
Mm.
dollars or whatever monetary currency. But this token can enable you to make vote on decisions, vote on governance type of decisions, like different proposals. So recently, they actually expanded to help people find full-time jobs, because that was a proposal that was brought forth, and all the token holders decided that would be the case. So I thought that was such an interesting signal for how there could be more ownership type of networks, or at least more employee engagement or participation in decision making. So yeah.
Wow. So if you're playing in the space of future of work, has that signal of change and what you're seeing there, like, are you extending that into your strategy and what it might look like?
Yeah. Yes, recently I've been partnering with Cindy Augustine, who is our Chief Talent Officer of McCann Group, which is a global marketing services network. And we've been running a series of workshops to really explore these different types of signals of change. Like the Web3 one was an example. Obviously, a lot of interesting statistics around burnout and whatnot in culture, or four-day work weeks. We also looked at different signals around like conscious inclusion, or like different kind of career mobility types of programs, or there's like an education program called Super High that is experimented with a basic income for creators and things like that. So we really explored all of that in coming up with a future ready employee value proposition or people value proposition. And to bring that to life, we looked at like 3 different types of scenarios. And one of them is a more of a transformative future, which I think I started kind of speaking to a bit, where it's in 10 years, like consumers would be more creator entrepreneurs, and there would be a blurry line between people who produce the content and people who consume the content. And in that kind of future, if we're even thinking about how we could kind of get there, or like how can the organization start kind of experimenting in that way, we're definitely thinking about the ways remuneration could work. We're thinking about how the boundaries between an employee and a freelancer is actually blurring in some ways. People within your organization and outside there, I think there's just more fluidity. And I think how we think about the formation of communities within organizations, I feel like they tend to be quite top down. It's like, oh, all these senior leaders who are in this discipline of strategy will have a group, or the creatives will have a group. But are there more emergent ways for communities to form based on interests or different trends that are coming up? For example, we just my team helps facilitate a metaverse and a Web3 kind of community, and that's one of the most active chats I've ever seen.
Wow.
Yeah, so I feel like there are different ways to kind of come in and look at, like, or start experimenting and seeing what can be emergent.
What specific activities do you find are your kind of go-to or the most effective when you're trying to explore that emerging future?
Yeah, so a lot of the work that I do is like, we might have a grander vision, but we want to not just build the full concept car, but like do the skateboard first. Like, what is the minimal thing that you could do? And we could apply this kind of concept, minimum viable product, from product design into organizational change. and think of interesting experiments or pilots that you could try out maybe with one team or a couple of teams, so you could get different types of learnings, and then seeing how that could go. And I think sometimes it's nice, oh, we are a global company, so we could run something in the US and also in Tokyo and China, because those markets are also very, very different. So if you could see how you could learn from, are there like crossover things that we could kind of share more broadly, or how do you account for the different nuances and let the local markets also have different takes on achieving the same thing. So lots of different kind of pilots and experimentation, and I think it's like almost everyone is now is experimenting or like using design thinking. But I think the part about capturing learnings is sometimes where we could fall short, and even in our work that could be hard. So it's how do you intentionally make sure that either you keep a learnings bank and you make sure that in your status you are reviewing that, or there are intentional moments where you are really sharing that knowledge, so that everyone can benefit.
Yeah. I love I'm really big on the intentional something. Do you find that, when you're running these kind of workshops and stuff, you can get really excited, especially as the designer of the workshop or the designer of the strategy? How do you hold yourself accountable for that activity to be intentional for the problem you're trying to solve?
I feel like you get such a high as a facilitator. Sometimes you create a set of workshops you're bringing together, you're really feeding off of the energy. And a lot of times people are like, oh, yay, I feel so inspired. And then that kind of drops off. And so like, how do you have that follow through is super important. So I think that's why I feel like a skill set in like the facilitation and ideation and design thinking needs to be matched with like being able to know how to influence and know how to create like these change through influence. And I would say that like a lot of times when you're in a workshop, you get excited by the new idea. And then you don't quite account for the transition that like when you are bringing a small group of people would have this idea, and then you're trying to convince other people who were not maybe a part of the process, or they are still like, they are actually very, very successful in the ways that they've been doing something. So I think it's like, how do you account for actually the grief that the moment of transition, that there could be like, maybe there needs to be a ritual, or there needs to be a moment to acknowledge that what we were doing worked really, really well, like celebrating like how it worked really, really well. But now like there is going to be something that we need to work towards that's different. So it could be like bringing people along the process of the ideation and having them as like the advocates for their different communities. Or how do you kind of take some things off of people's plates and say that like, you don't have to do this anymore, and we're going to introduce this new thing that could actually make your job more like easier than before. Or maybe it could be like, it will be a more fun thing because we now have a new technology that could actually make the process more fun, or a new whatever kind of behavior change solution as well. So kind of also knowing who the stakeholders are and what they would be motivated by can then help you see like how you can communicate that idea, whether it's saying that it'll make their lives easier, it could make them look better, or like or that they would actually achieve more impact if they could do that way. So it really depends on the kind of levers and the people who would be the most important to kind of influence in the within the bigger change.
Yeah. I agree with that. I definitely think it's like what's in it for them as an individual, and the part that they play. If we try to think about like some of the stuff you're doing is like 10 years in the future, and we're in that, like, yes, we're sold and the stakeholders, you've got their buy-in, and then it's like 6 months later, what kind of strategies can we make sure that we're helping that integrate into the journey of that 10-year journey, or remembering like we made these commitments, let's not fall back into our old ways of working, and any tips?
I feel like it is a lot of times the people, the leaders I work with, they are so excellent at what they're doing on the day-to-day, and they have deep expertise in what they're doing. They could be running like one of our offices or the markets, or running a deep function, but they're so embroiled in the day-to-day. They have so many fires to put out. There's so many problems to solve that feel so urgent and immediate. So actually giving them the space to open up the thinking and be able to imagine 10 years out, it feels very freeing. And I think our shared heroine, Jane McGonigal, kind of talks about this notion of time spaciousness. When you allow people to have to be able to make change within a 10-year scale, then actually they could become more imaginative and more creative in the kind of solutions that they do come up with. And so once they are kind of at that state, we get to feeling very excited about things, then we tend to, we need to kind of ground into then the realities in some ways. And I feel like the notion of backcasting, which Bob Johansen at the Institute for the Future kind of speaks to, is super helpful. So and he actually talks about how it's easier sometimes to think 10 years out than to think more immediate. So once you have that kind of 10-year mark, then you can backcast from, like, say 20, like your preferred future in 2032 is XYZ. And then what is the predicate to get there? Like, what is the year before? What do you have to do the year before in order to get there? And the year before that? And then you kind of work your way towards like today, and making sure what you come up with today is one of those minimum viable products, that the easy to do kind of pilots. And then hopefully you'll have some amazing success stories, and then other people would want to join in and do what you're doing, and then have that kind of plant those seeds, and then the change can happen in a more emergent way.
I see that working as well in the work that we're doing. Do you find that with that you're encouraging them to align it to something like the organizational strategy in that, or so it is linked and then they kind of have to prioritize it as well? Is it part of that sort of future planning?
I think it's from the get-go, like how you cast who is in the ideation workshops is important, that they feel involved, the important stakeholders feel involved in the process and involved in creating the solutions. And they don't have to be in the very, very beginning. It could be that you have some people in the beginning, and then you bring in different people at different points, and allow them to react to certain things you've already come up with and provide their contributions, and then you integrate it. And I think another skill that a facilitator has is like the power of synthesis. So it's like, how do you keep kind of all the different parts in play, and be able to connect the dots and help people connect the dots. And
there's a really nice testimonial on your LinkedIn account around your ability to do that, and it says that you can take a really complex problem, internalize it, and spit it out very simply. Are you able to figure out what that process that goes on in your mind is? Do you know what it is?
It does feel like, to me, it feels a little bit intuitive in a way, but I think what happens is I'm also a very curiosity driven person like you are.
Mm.
So I think I start kind of like I kind of when I'm listening in a workshop setting and people are saying different things, I
Yeah.
could like catch on to what really makes me most excited,
Mm.
and be able to start. And then I would just like jot down these like key pieces and kind of,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's on a miro board or on physical post-it notes, and then I'll start kind of tracking for like what are the subsequent people saying, and do they kind of fall into those buckets, or maybe there's something new that they're saying and I could add to that mix.
Yeah.
So kind of being able to um both like listen for the details, but keeping kind of like what is starting to emerge that is really interesting is, I think,
Mm.
how the what is happening in the brain, or the processing or the synthesizing in real time.
Yeah.
um if that's helpful. Yeah.
No, that is good.
Yeah.
And it makes me think I'm similar. And I think when you're looking and you're kind of documenting, you're like, is this valuable or not? And
Yeah.
sometimes you're not sure, but it is about noting it all down. And then
Mhm.
when it comes to like, oh my God, there's everything. And now what do I do next?
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
question that I ask myself is like, what is the problem I'm trying to solve right now? And then
Mm.
that's what I kind of can link into, okay, well, the immediate problem is this, and that's important for that. Those
Yeah.
things are important, but maybe they're for, I don't know, another initiative or
Yeah.
some other time in the future, but it's
Yeah.
important that I've linked it. So
Mm.
that's the thing that helps me kind of not get overwhelmed, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. I think I used to kind of fall into like taking too many notes and then like
Mm.
getting kind of mired. Um, or actually, like I feel like earlier in my career, or I started noticing that sometimes I would like zone out
Oh
in
God.
certain sessions. And then I was like, oh shoot. Like then I realized that I have the power to change that. I don't actually have to be bored by the situation. And if I'm
Mm.
bored, it's actually a huge signal that like the meeting is not going well, and that
Yeah.
it's where I could like insert myself and like shift things. Or and that was even before I think I started developing the skill of a facilitator, or
Yeah.
those were the earlier days.
Yeah.
So actually, like my like my boredom is like kind of a huge signal for me that like something is not quite going well, or it's dragging too long, and I have to kind of like gently like move the conversation into a new area, or close that, or like put that
Yeah.
in the later column. I will address that later column. So yeah.
Yeah. That's cool. I don't zone out because I'm very like, it's all intentional. I'm like, I know what I'm in
Totally.
there to
Yeah.
get kind of thing. But that whole like, okay, it's time to park this and move on moment. So I
Yeah.
set it up at the beginning and I'm kind of like, it's going to feel chaotic to you. And there's probably a point where I'm just going to cut you off or I'm going to move on. Just trust
Yeah.
the process. So I'm setting them up when they're like, and this, and then I'm like, yes. No, I don't say like that's not useful, but like when they've kind of finished and I'm like, okay, we're going to move on. Like
Yeah.
at least they know it's not just like, what the hell? It's like, I've set that expectation that
Yeah.
we're going to be jumping around, but it makes sense in here and the outcome we're
Yes.
trying to achieve.
Yes. Lovely. Yeah.
um, I know one of the projects that you worked on was around, you co-led training for your company-wide
Hmm.
day for meaning. You want to
Hmm.
tell us about the problem that it was trying to solve, just to set the scene?
Yeah, yeah. So Day for Meaning is an initiative started by our diversity, equity, and inclusion team led by Singleton Beato, who's amazing. And a few years ago, the company decided that they would, for one day a year, close down our operations. So
Hmm.
we won't be servicing clients on that day,
Yeah.
and really have, back to intentionality, have an intentional day to reflect on diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives.
Mm.
And and what are some of the not less so of the programmatic changes than like how can we come up with behavior change that could really affect the day-to-day experience of people working at the agency. So each year there's a different theme, and there's a different focus. So I think the first year was around belonging. The next year was about connection, and this year is going to be around shared purpose. So the whole company focuses on the different stimuli that the core team provides, and we have different breakout discussions. We come up with new actions, and that we could then implement and try out in our day-to-day. So yes,
that's really cool. Well,
yeah.
One thing I'd love to know is it can be very like, diversity and inclusion it can be done well, or it can just be like, we have this initiative, we've ticked the box, now we've done it. So what makes it more, kind of come from a place of compassion and impact as an organization?
I would say one of the most impactful solutions that I saw that I think ends up having enables a lot of empathy is that our strategic process used to be called 5 C's. So we would go, when we do the initial kind of landscape kind of analysis, what is the environment like for the problem we're solving? We would look at different trends around culture, around the category, so the competitor of the client. We would look at the consumer that they are focused on. We also look at the company itself, and how the different parts kind of come together in connections. And after the first day for meaning, I believe it was maybe our Australia office, one of our offices came up with the idea of adding an additional C that they called conscious inclusion. So really being intentional about, like, even in the very initial understanding of the problem space, you are really looking at, are there biases? Are there underrepresented groups that are currently overlooked? And so that is so core to the day-to-day of like any client projects we would take on. So I feel like it's so impactful, and that actually led to one of our clients, Reckitt. In the US, they make Lysol cleaning wipes. They're so they make Dettol, like so those type of products. And but one of the in their pain category, because of conscious inclusion, they then realized that Black women of color, their pain is not taken seriously by doctors as much as like if you're non-Black and non-women. So that insight really changed their strategy into kind of thinking about how they are like marketing the product and being like being intentional about, like, this is actually a huge problem that Black women's pain is not being taken seriously, that there's an assumption that they could take more pain than other people, and it's a totally racist thought. So so I feel like that is also a way for the team to develop empathy for the people we serve.
Is it so with conscious inclusion, is it almost like you have a set of questions that people use to consider and at least empathize? Or what does it look like if you're doing a campaign or you're doing a workshop, whatever it is?
Yeah, it's definitely looking at different questions that can help you uncover biases, uncover
Yeah.
what historically underrepresented groups, their experiences, or the lack of focus in their needs. So that could then enable us to then have an opportunity to address some of the legacy challenges. And yes.
Yeah. So it's almost like you just create the space, even at a simple level, you're doing a persona and it's asking about what are their current experiences to do with this. Potentially you're going out and having a look at what are the perceptions or the stereotypes around this individual, this community group, and even just doing a Google search. So it's just that space to consider them in the first place.
Or maybe like we weren't even considering that group before. Like, are there groups that we didn't ever effortfully or like intentionally like included in our process?
Yes, that's really cool. Are there any frameworks or tools that you're loving at the moment?
I think at this point I have to like talk about a lot of the amazing future foresight type of tools. Been using them a lot in the strategic process. And one of them is game designer Jane McGonigal's game called 100 Ways Anything Could Be Different. I use that as a warm-up for one of the sessions we did for our talent strategy ideation group. And we were still in the initial stage of like, at that point, understanding the context and the environment we were in. And we were looking at what is the future of creative talent or the future of creators. And so we divided into different groups, and I also invited amazing external experts in different areas. And so one group was kind of thinking about the future of learning. One group was thinking about the future of productivity or how work is measured. Another group is thinking about the future of recruiting. The fourth group was thinking about the future of how work is organized. And what they had to do was like list as many basic facts about the topic as they could, like simple kind of things like for learning, the mastery of creative skills take many years. And then they had to then flip that fact and rewrite that fact and provide an explanation. So maybe the mastery of creative skills only take days. And so what could the explanation for that be? It could be that we have like AI tools like Midjourney or DALL-E, and you may not need to be an amazing illustrator and like hone your craft for years, but that you could like write a prompt and have that generate an image. And so it might just take you a few days to get used to using and creating those prompts, and you would be able to then have some amazing illustrations to support you, whatever point you're making, right? So I feel like this exercise of like just flipping certain facts that seem like so unchangeable, and the flip back could be so improbable, but then you could like either Google and see what are there like explanations for this kind of strange idea, and then you would start actually tracking and finding that there is evidence for that. There's already signals of change that could explain this kind of strange near future and how that could happen. And so I really enjoy that game as like an easy way for anyone to kind of play, and a non-stressful way, because you could then use Google and see what kind of comes back up, and that could already open up their minds and really prime people's brains for like, I could actually think about and stretch my thinking in ways that wouldn't be bogged down by like constraints that I thought were existing.
And I think that is the key thing, is like when we're trying to create change and impact, it is around like getting people out of their current mindset. And I believe like something like that is so good, because it's even like, what do we believe to be true right now? And asking those kinds of questions, documenting it, and then saying, okay, well, what's the complete opposite of that right now? And even anytime like the group, the Future Origin Optimists group that we're in, there's been the wackiest things that I have never even like conceived in my brain ever. And then we're like, what about that? And there has never been anything that has not been already explored in some way that we find on Google. And that just fascinates me. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, totally. And I love what you said about there are certain things we believe to be true, but that they could also be opportunities for change, because there's one other exercise that I was trying out called Transformation Jenga. And this is a tool that I found on SY Partners site. They have a really cool tool set. And this is usually helping find out what is most essential to a company. And then, so you will get people to list out what are the essential or fundamental qualities of the company. And for us, we were using that for our talent strategy. So there are certain values that we hold dear, like bravery, integrity, or like, if we think about it more broadly, it could be your D&I commitment, or we work in an integrated fashion across different disciplines. It could be our innovation capability. So you could like write down those things. And then you do the second step where you actually judge each thing that you're writing and really like decide, is this actually essential or is it non-essential? And non-essential doesn't mean that it's like, oh, this is just not important, but it just suggests that it may not be a defining characteristic. And once you cross that out, then you can like see, oh, actually the things that are crossed out are actually opportunities for innovation, things that we could change that would make us actually more unique if we actually really like this thing. Or it could actually be things that you want to leave behind because that's no longer maybe aligned with the new kind of vision that you have, and you need to always leave some things behind in order to make space for the new. So I thought that that's such a smart kind of exercise to really consider what is really the seeds of your purpose versus, oh, there are some opportunities for innovation.
Love it. That's so cool. By the way, for the people listening, I am documenting all these like activities and stuff, so they'll be in the description so you can go explore them for yourselves as well. Any other tools or resources that you're loving at the moment, finding useful?
There are so many. Is there an area that you think would be most helpful?
I'm going to say, I think we've talked a lot about mindset. So let's think around bringing siloed teams together to work together on something.
Oof, yeah, that's a biggie. I think a lot of times the experience of it is going to change things. And you could do all the talk about how it would be great, and there are definitely structural barriers that you would probably have to, especially I think in big corporate environments, that you have to then enable that people are not. I think it's actually something that we do really quite well in the Can Work group, where we are very generous. I had worked at previous companies where it's like not as or I've heard also different stories where people would be like, oh, I need to get certain permissions, or like, oh, I have to find the right job code for this before I could do this. But here it's actually quite easy. And I think you are also trying to find the most passionate people in those different silos. And there And I think a lot of times you will be able to find people who are actually as excited about the thing that you want to be doing. And they might actually be like, oh, there are no one else who is excited. I'm just this
Mm.
lone penguin working on this. And then you like find all your penguins. And then
Yay.
you're like, oh, like could we actually just try doing something together? And it could be for us, we're a client services company, so it's like there's a project that we could actually bring
Mm.
like different creative minds together, and they might have different kind of areas of expertise, whether it's they
Mm.
are a VR expert, or they are a copywriter, or they are excellent in campaigns, or they're more like a creative technologist. And like
Mm.
being able to then bring them together. And we've gotten quite good during the pandemic and running these 2-hour hacks just using Miro boards.
Yep.
And then they realize, oh, when we are together, we can, and we're in like breakout groups and talking about things and coming back together and sharing ideas, that can actually spark so much that that could like expedite like the process. We were working with a healthcare related team during the pandemic, and they were like, wow, you just sped up my process from a very traditional kind of a
Yes.
campaign kind of work to like more digital and innovation work. Just by a 2-hour hack, you sped it up by the work stream by 4 to 5 weeks.
Mm.
So I think finding opportunities and say like it's like a low commitment thing. It's just 2 hours out of your day.
Yes.
Let's just come together and try something. And then like as an amazing facilitator, you'd be able to get some amazing gold nuggets out of that,
Yeah.
and be able to demonstrate like, well, we can actually come up with something, and then use the influencing techniques to then
Yes.
be able to follow through, to sell it into the client, or convince the important stakeholders to do what the next steps would be.
Yeah, definitely. And I think for people listening, just you've communicated an excellent process. Actually, we've just spoken about it in a almost the reverse order.
Mm.
But if I just summarize it quickly, it's just around who are the people. Sorry, what's the problem I'm trying to solve? Who are the people that will help us solve that problem? What do they care about? Such as, I'm going to speed up your process from 5 weeks to 1 week if you just give me 2 hours of your time. So speak to them. They will see the value in being there. Use some of the activities to reveal ideas and things to explore. Then it's around choosing, prioritizing them, and then integrating them into the workflow or the strategy or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
Woo.
You see, this is the power of synthesis. You just did that.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. And I think the prioritizing and integrating the workflow is like, it's like sometimes the non-sexy thing, like, because I think we're always so excited about the initial ideation and all of that. So
Yeah.
sometimes we come up with so many ideas and we don't know actually how to prioritize what will give me some wins. That's something that's demonstratable, so that you can do like all the other ones, or the
Yes.
bigger ones. And the integrating the workflow also is that I think sometimes we create all the new things, but it's not fitting into some of the day-to-day, so they kind of like gets put to the wayside. So like, are there things that you could already integrate into the day-to-day process that could change things? And then there are obviously, I think, moments where you would then need to like set aside that this is a new thing, and then have a team, or like carve out the space for that.
Yeah. And I think it's also like utilizing the working group strengths, or the people's strengths. Like for me, I'm good at that ideation, facilitation sort of stuff, but when it comes to the detail, like I know how to do the prioritization exercise, and then I'm like, don't make me execute on it. However, I've got a teammate, Hannah, who is so detail orientated, and she gets a sense of achievement from getting into the detail, and she is so good at doing that, like, and every little thing that she's knocking off the task list is helping us progress. I'm just not part of that part. So it's almost like, where do you pull in certain talent, utilize them along that kind of life cycle of the journey?
I love that. And I think at that point, it's like your best friend is the project manager, and
Yeah.
I definitely
I have
have I
a good
have
one of
that best
those.
friend too.
Yay! Well, that talks about my other team member, Victoria. I know she never listens to these because she hates like hearing herself and seeing herself on camera. But I will let her know that she got a special shout out because she is an
Yes.
excellent project manager. So yeah, wow. Okay, I have loved this conversation. I feel like I could definitely continue on, but I feel it's a very nice space to end it for our listeners. And there's a lot to
Yeah.
take away and to execute on. And what I love is like we're in the learning and development space, you're in like marketing and that sort of
Mhm.
stuff, but the synergy is just we're doing the same thing. And I just think that's
Mhm.
so beautifully reflected here. So I just encourage our community to like learn from the world around you. Like we're problem solving and making humanity a better place through our work.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
there's other industries out there actually, which brings me back to one last question,
Yes.
which was around when you said you took your year of like, what is my
Mhm.
creative self-expression and the
Yeah.
impact I want to have on the world? Do you know what that
Yes.
is now?
I think it's actually a lot of the work in facilitation.
Yeah.
And but what I really discovered in that year is that especially when you're doing corporate work, it's so much about your analytical thinking mind.
Mm,
And my coach is a somatics leadership coach, and
okay.
she really helped me bring me back to my body. So actually, when I facilitate now, I actually stand up versus
Mm,
like in the virtual environment, it's so you're so used to just sitting down.
yeah.
Um, but like actually how movement actually like physical movement can actually get the creative juices flowing. And
Mm,
so there are times where I ask people to actually stand up and we do like a quick dance to a Beyonce song or something
yeah.
like that, or like or it could be just like simple like stretching. Or I learned from Strozzi Institute, there's like a centering practice where you're centering in length, which is like
Mm,
a line of dignity, in your width, which is
mm,
an access for like connection, so how you give and receive, and
mm,
also the access of time, which is like what's we don't often even think about our backs because we're so frontal, but like
yeah.
what are your supports, like what are your history, your ancestors, like who has your back, to like really feeling your insides and then like looking forward. And then
Mm,
the last part is like centering in like purpose and intention, and like why do you do this work, or like
mm,
who do you love, what do you care about. Um and I think for me it's that kind of creative expression for the sake of a flourishing world, for the sake of more connection and connection to people, and also nature, the environment,
mm,
and the universe. I have a spiritual side to me as well.
yeah.
So I think it's like that, all of that kind of coming together.
That's cool. Well, I would encourage people just to kind of like observe you and the passion that has come through today, because
Mm,
it sounds like, you know, when you're describing it, you're living that. And what I would
mm,
just encourage people, you're a role model for when you prioritize to figure
mm,
out what your soul is about or your
mhm,
purpose or whatever, you can have it and you can
mhm,
go out there, and that's where it doesn't feel like work and you're, you know, doing things that give you purpose every day and meaning and all that sort of stuff. So I think that seems to have nicely integrated it, even though you might have been in the industry already, you just probably like honed it in a little bit.
yeah.
The one question I had though was, when you did that, was there a particular activity that helped go like the penny dropped and it was like, oh my god,
Mm.
that's the thing for me?
Yeah, I think the penny drop is probably different for different people.
Mm.
But for me, it was rediscovering dance. And
Oh.
my coach, Leanne Mallory, who wrote a book called Guts and Grace, she's an amazing executive coach. She also has a conscious dance background, and and certification and experience and practice. And so in my year of working with her, I have had many experiences in being in group retreats and group settings, and
Yeah.
and dancing in a way that I haven't done in a long time.
Mm.
And when I was little, I did more performance-based stuff like the ballet, those types of performative things. But then that dancing could actually be just bringing you back to your own sensations and your own body, and like you're tapping back into how you feel and your emotions, and also at the same time just being more connected to what is surrounding you, and the world that you live in. So that was a huge penny drop moment for me, and that's how actually what I do before every facilitation is like I always like do a little dance myself.
Yeah.
And that lead in music then usually starts the actual
Yeah.
session. So that's my little ritual.
That's cool. Did you do a dance before recording with me today?
I didn't do that today.
Oh
Maybe
no!
that could have been better.
Oh my God, we could have got better from you. Wow, we'll have to do a number 2 episode. I think that's beautiful, because that reflects myself as well. Like, I always think when I was a little girl, what were my passions? What was I curious about? And I've really reintegrated all of that stuff back into my life. And like, I'm very grateful and living with purpose and all that happy. So another like self exercise for our listeners, like I think it's evident in the two of us, is go visit your little mini version you of like under 10, and then get that stuff back into your life.
Yes, I did. The first time I met Kim, I saw skateboards or like surfboards, skateboards in the background.
Skateboards, yeah.
Skateboards, yes.
Which I'm doing after this, because I'm like, I need that right now. Like, I need that little soul filled. So yeah.
Beautiful.
Okay, thank you, Serena. Incredible
Thank you, Kim.
discussion. I am like, big smiles, obviously. Like, this has been I'm grateful, very selfish for me because it's filled my cup, but I know that our listeners would have got a lot of value. And I encourage people to look at the resources. You'll be able to connect with Serena and follow all the amazing things that she's up to. And please share it with people that it will add value, because I think conversations like this do change the world. They make it a better place. So encourage, the more you share it, someone else has that epiphany moment for themselves, they're a better human being, and then they have a better impact through their interactions or the work that they do as well. So thank you always for choosing to learn with us at Belvista Studios, and thank you to our incredible guest, Serena.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
What's up, awesome human? Thank you on behalf of myself and the Belvista Studios team for continuously choosing to learn with us. We really appreciate it. If the tips and the insights and the context resonate with you and you want to take your skills to the next level, or you want to make your life way easier, you will love our Creator Hub. The Creator Hub is a place for people like you and us. Basically, it's the stuff that we use internally at Belvista Studios, and then we just share it publicly with you. The Creator Hub is created by instructional designers for instructional designers, and what you'll love there at the moment is we've got a quiz, Could I Be a Better Instructional Designer?, that has so much tips in the feedback if you're interested in human-centered design or just taking your skills to the next level in terms of the solutions you're creating and the problems you want to solve. But in there as well, aren't we cute? That's us. But we've got the coaching courses, freebies, give us gratitude, and also we've got some templates. And basically they're always around the lens of learning experience design, instructional design, and e-learning. So a human-centered design focus is very much what we're about at Belvista Studios. So putting your learners at the heart of a solution and creating something for their needs. So there's the human-centered design stuff, and then we've also got the business stuff. So this is the stuff they don't teach you about when you want to become a freelancer or a consultant in the instructional design world. So go check it out. The link is in the description. You can check out everything that is available for you. Thank you for choosing to learn with us. Continuously invest in your skills. You will be rewarded as an instructional designer. Share this stuff, share it with other people, because when we are better instructional designers, we create better solutions that create better humans, that create a better world. So we have a very important role, and I'm excited to be on this journey with you. Have an awesome day.